refreshing you on why is it that it's good to be here. When you moved in, if you recall, you signed an agreement, the continuing care agreement. So we're going to kind of refresh your memory of what it is that you signed. You know, a lot of times that might have been 6 months ago. Some of you might have been 10, 12 years ago. Some of you might not even know where that agreement is anymore. So if you need a copy of it, we have those in our office, and we can always get those to you. So we'll do some introductions here. First of all, I'm David Tiesenga. I've been around Holland Home for 35 years, and I started when I was 12 years old. But no, I was CFO for the last 30 years, and earlier this year made a change, and now I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Holland Home, and the guy that is replacing me is behind me, Adam Kidner, and Adam came to us from Agility Health. He was an interim CFO for them, and prior to that time spent time with Crow as a CPA, had quite a few healthcare clients. And his claim to fame, he's a graduate of Calvin College, so he's got some immediate credibility there. And Adam's been working with Holland Home a little over 5 years now, so we're excited to have him here as well. So oftentimes we'll do like board coffees, and we'll get questions from time to time. Boy, it'd be nice to see an organizational chart. Because we start throwing around all these different companies and so forth. And so on this page is really the organizational chart of Holland Home. We actually have a holding company called Christian Living Services that all of our entities kind of report up to. So when we talk about the board of Holland Home, really it's the board of Christian Living Services. And on the left-hand side of this page, in the green boxes are really what we think of when we think of Holland Home. It's the facilities. And we have the Breton campus, the Raybrook campus, and the Holland Home Foundation. It wasn't that long ago that we had another box in there called Fulton. And we actually completed the sale of Fulton last week Friday. So we no longer own that building. We sold that to Hope Network. I see Coral over there. So we finally gave up your old working grounds over there at Fulton Manor. So Hope Network bought that from Holland Home. They're going to redevelop the property with affordable housing, supportive housing, and put some of their programs in that campus. They're financing that with tax-exempt credits that they were awarded this summer on. And so they've got to go through the process of getting the capital on those credits. Which will take them about 6 to 9 months, and then they go out and then we'll begin doing their redevelopment plans. But we've heard that they will probably put somewhere between $20 and $30 million into that building over the next number of years. So we're really excited to see that campus continue serving the Grand Rapids community in the future. Also on this is the kind of the pinkish boxes, but that's Faith Hospice, so it's a separate organization that's wholly owned by Holland Home and Christian Living Services, but that's our hospice provider that's available to anybody who reaches end-of-life needs. Below that is Reliance Community Care Partners. Reliance Community Care Partners manages the Medicaid waiver program in 13 counties in West Michigan. Well, what is the Medicaid waiver program? It's a program that's funded through Medicaid dollars, state of Michigan dollars, that our taxes pay for people who are nursing home eligible. So they meet the requirements to be in a nursing facility, so up on 3rd or 4th floor here, but have chosen to stay at home. And so Reliance coordinates care through providers to provide nursing home care for people living at home. And it's a great program because the state of Michigan may pay Holland Home $6,000 or $7,000 for somebody who's on Medicaid up in nursing, and they're paying a fraction of that cost $1,000 or $2,000 a month to pay for care that's arranged for at home, because you don't have all of the facility costs that you have in a nursing facility. So exceptional program. There's about 1,000 people in West Michigan that we serve on that Medicaid waiver program. We also have a mental health clinic, psychiatric clinic in the first floor of the corporate office building that Reliance cares for people and provides mental health services for folks down there. And we do some other things with senior millage, so part of the tax dollars in Kent County go to senior millage, and Reliance will take care of distributing those according to the millage program. And then really the last thing that Reliance does is they're a third-party administrator for claim adjudication for PACE programs. So what they do is they process claims for care resources and several other PACE programs throughout the state of Michigan. And so that's what Reliance does. And then Trillium Institute is another wholly owned subsidiary. Trillium Institute is completely funded through contributions, and they provide really educational services for palliative care, for fellowships, for physicians who want to know more about palliative care. And palliative care is kind of like pre-hospice care. So it's not really end of life. You could be still receiving treatments, trying to get better, but you're dealing with a lot of the side effects, could be pain management, more quality of life types of issues. And so we're training physicians to be out in the community to do more of that, because we think it really enhances quality of life for folks. So that's Trillium Institute. And then the blue boxes, the center ones there, we have Care Resources, and we're a partner with Metro Health, University of Michigan Hospital, as well as Pine Rest and the Grand Rapids Dominican Sisters. And Care Resources is a PACE program. So it's like a Medicare, Medicaid HMO, where we get paid money through Medicare in the state of Michigan, and we're responsible for 100% of the healthcare needs of that participant. We have about 270 people in that program. So we receive 2 payments a month, one from the state, one from the federal government, and we have to provide all of the healthcare needs, and we're totally at risk for all of those. So whether that's hospital care, whether that's dental care, whether it's eyeglasses, hearing aids, prescriptions, all of that gets paid, and we have to kind of manage that. But an exceptionally good program, and it really serves, most people live out in the community. We have a few residents who are on the Care Resources program. And then Tandem 365 is another collaborative program that we have. We are in collaboration with Porter Hills, Sunset, Clark, Holland Home, and then Life EMS. So this is actually a limited liability company. It's not a nonprofit, and it has to be set up that way because Life EMS is a for-profit company. But what we do is our customer is a payer, Priority Health, Blue Care Network. And what we really help them with is managing people who are on their Advantage programs who are spending way more money than you probably need to. So they're going to the emergency room, they're ending up in the hospital a lot, they're maybe mismanaging their medications, and so we come in and we provide case management to actually improve their quality of life, keep them out of the hospital, keep them out of emergency room, and it lowers the cost to the Advantage program, and we get a payment for that. So we have about 1,200 people in that program that we serve in the West Michigan area. And it's all handled through Tandem 365. And then all of the boxes to the far right are really our Atrio programs, our home care program. And a few years ago, it's been 4 years that we actually merged with Clark and Rest Haven's home care programs. So we have a certified program here in Grand Rapids. We have a Lakeshore certified program that serves kind of the Lakeshore area. And then we have a private duty agency that really covers that whole 3-4 county area of Kent County, Ottawa County, Allegheny County, and so forth, providing private duty services. So when you think of Holland Home, You think of those facilities and the green boxes on the left-hand side there, but really we're much bigger than that and have all of these other entities that are there.
Wow, wow.
So specifically for Holland Home, there's actually an organization, Leading Age National, yes?
David, just to go back to those organization boxes, those blue ones, particularly Care Resources and Tandem 365, there are some tiny, tiny percentages in those boxes.
Yep.
What do they mean?
That's our ownership percentage. So Care Resources, we own 40%, Holland Home does, or CLSO owns that. And for Tandem, it's 20%, we own 20% of that.
Who owns the rest of it?
So Care Resources, the other partners are Metro Health, University of Michigan Hospital, Pine Rest, and Grand Rapids Dominican Sisters. So they each own 20, and Holland Home owns 40. And for Tandem, it's Porter Hills, Sunset, Clark, Holland Home, and Life EMS each own 20% of it. Yep.
Wow.
So for Holland Home specifically, there's a classification, Leading Age, and Ziegler put together, tabulate statistics of retirement senior living communities all through the United States. And they have a listing called their top 200. Well, out of the top 200, we're the 69th largest in the country.
Wow.
Number 69. We've been around since 1892. Can anybody here remember 1892? Located obviously in Grand Rapids. We have a debt rating through Fitch, which simply means because we have debt, we've gotten a rating. It's a BBB minus. It's an investment grade rating. Out of 4,000 communities across the United States, there's only about 170 of them that actually have a debt rating or one of them, and we have an investment grade rating. What that simply means is in situations where we have to go out and borrow money, we have the ability to do that at the most affordable rates possible.
Wow.
And so that's great news. And then you can see for each one of our campuses, you know, there's 557 residences at Bretton Woods. We have 636 here on the Raybrook campus. We have 20 at Trillium Woods for a total of 1,213 units. If they were to measure that just on the independent living units, you know, the areas that you live, estates 1 and 2, 3 in the homes, we're actually the 42nd largest provider in the country. If they base it on assisted living units, we're number 68. And if they base it on the number of nursing beds we have, we're number 141. And then they have one other classification that they look at. They look at the volume of home and community-based services. And out of those top 200, we're number 5 in the country as far as services that we provide.
Wow.
So all that's good for you because you chose to move into a community that if you need those services, we have them all. So whatever your particular situation is, if you need those services, they're available to you. It's one of the reasons why you chose Holland Home. So what is that full continuum? Our facility-based, we have independent living, which you're in, assisted living. We have that both here on this campus in the DeVos wing, as well as at Breton. We have memory care, you know, that's the Cook unit, and the Verblau, and the Lendick unit, the Mall unit. And we have that out at Breton. Rehab is provided up in 3rd floor nursing or out at Breton. Skilled nursing, inpatient hospice out at Trillium Woods. And then we've talked about our community-based services. We've got home care through Atrio, hospice care through Faith Hospice, the PACE program, if that's something that you might qualify for in the future, the waiver program, and Tandem 365 for population health. So when you made the move to, or thought about coming into Holland Home, a lot of people don't realize this, but you received a disclosure agreement, which is about 20, 25 pages long. and it really listed all of the information you needed to understand about making a decision to live here or not. Well, that information is all regulated by a law, and that law is called the Continuing Care Community Disclosure Act, Public Act 448 of 2014. And that law was just updated in 2014. It actually replaced the Living Care Disclosure Act of 1976. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but back in the 70s, when I was in high school, there was what is now Samaritas on 32nd Street.
Yeah.
There was a guy by the name of Calvin, of all things, that was trying to develop a senior living community there. And they kind of started construction on it, and then it stopped. Well, what happened was this guy was taking money from potential people that were going to live there and build a retirement community. Well, he went belly up and folks lost the money, ran away with it. Well, this happened in several places around the country. So it was at that time that states started developing rules to say, if you're going to take an upfront payment, an entrance fee, with the promise of providing future care, we're going to regulate that. And that's really what was the impetus behind the original regulations that were in place. So every year, we have to go through an annual renewal filing with the state of Michigan. So that's a process that I did for many, many years. Now Adam gets the pleasure of going through and meeting with the bureaucrat on how to do that. So we do that every year. What it empowers the state of Michigan to do with the Michigan Corporation Securities Bureau is to prohibit any fraudulent practices that are out there, and to impose certain regulatory duties upon the state. And then if they find something that isn't right, they can penalize you for it. They can impose a penalty on you. So that's how all of this gets regulated. This is most of the stuff we don't make up. We're just simply following the rules of the state of Michigan. So within Michigan, there are actually 32 registered CCRCs, which is Continuing Care Retirement Community, or I might call it a life plan community. There's 32 of them. 29 are facility-based, 3 are really home-based programs. Of the 29, Holland Home actually controls 11% of all of the beds, independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing. So we dominate really the market for continuing care facilities. And for those of you who have very good eyes, on the next page, there's a listing of all those communities. And there's no test at the end, so don't worry about it if you can't read it. But the very first one is Holland Home. So what's interesting is Holland Home was the first facility in the state of Michigan to actually get registered under these rules. So that's kind of interesting. We were kind of leaders way back in 1977 was our first registration date. And then we just sorted these by location. So the ones that are in the Grand Rapids area, which there's a lot of them, Porter Hills, Covenant Living, Maple Creek, which is really Samaritas, Beacon Hill, Clark, and Sunset. So those are kind of the local ones that are here in the West Michigan area. You can see there's a big list of a bunch of other ones that are out there. So the disclosure statement. We give this to you. It's like a prospectus. So if you were going to go out and buy a mutual fund, your investment advisor is supposed to give you a prospectus so you can read about it and understand why you want to, if you want to make this investment or not. That's really what this disclosure statement is there for. It's to give to you ahead of time so that you can evaluate whether it is that you want to move in. So that's a big thing that you would have gotten that ahead of time. And in that disclosure statement, on the very first page or second page in there, it really points out in bold capped letters 4 things. 1, there's a high degree of risk. So the state of Michigan wants seniors to say, hey, wait a minute here, there's a high degree of risk. I want to make sure I evaluate this and talk to somebody other than the facility that's providing the disclosure statement. So seek the advice of an attorney or some financial advisor. Well, it's too late for all of you, you're here, you signed the agreement. But that's what we have that there for. They also want to let you know that the entrance fee, that down payment that you made when you came in, is subordinate to our debt. So if for some reason we were to go belly up, the debt holders get their money first. That's important to realize. Anytime you're putting money down, you want to realize in what position am I in to get that money back. That's right on the front page of the disclosure statement. And then the last one is no person is authorized to make any promises that are outside of what's in that agreement. So, you know, oftentimes we'll hear from a resident saying, well, so-and-so told me this.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot, and really no person, according to the agreement and the disclosure statements, allowed to authorize anything that's really outside of what's in the agreement. So that's important to realize. So the continuing care agreement, we're going to cover that agreement. We're going to talk about the entrance fees, and we're going to talk about the monthly fees a little bit at the very end. And so let's jump to the next page. The continuing care agreement. So you've gotten the disclosure statement, you read through it, you talked to your attorney, your kids, your family, you made sure you were comfortable while coming in here, and then you had signing day, the day that you closed and coming into your unit, you met with the salespeople, and they read through this big long agreement, and you're still worried about what I'm gonna keep from my condo or my house, and you know, what's going to the kids, what's going to new to you, and all this sort of stuff. There's just a lot going on at that time. But when you break down the continuing care agreement and all the information that's in it, there's really two key things. One is you have priority access to our system, nursing assisted living, over somebody who doesn't have an agreement. And we're guaranteeing it's going to be there for you. That's key. I'll talk a little bit more about why that's key. Second thing is, if for some reason while you're living with us, you run out of the ability to pay us for it, we're still going to continue providing care for you. In essence, that's what the continuing care agreement's all about. You've got access to the best senior living community health system known to mankind, and if you run out of money, we're still going to provide care to you. Now, there's a couple provisions that's not true, but for the most part, if you do what you're supposed to, and we do what we're supposed to, that'll work for you. Interestingly enough, some people will say, well, I don't think that's ever going to be a problem that I run out of money. Well, 1 out of every 6 to 7 of our residents has run out of money. You have no idea who they are. And it's our job to make sure you don't know. And if you ever need that care, we're not going to share that with anybody else either about benevolent care that happens. That's the beauty of working for Holland Home. We don't share the information. We continue to provide the care for you whether you can pay for it or not. And that's the beauty of Holland Home. So you thought that listing of communities was small.
Yeah.
I'm really testing your eyes here.
Oh, boy.
Don't try to even read this. I actually have the actual official chart right here, so this is a little bit more readable. I think the key point here is the continuing care agreement. The very first one we did for independent living was from 1987 when we opened up Estates 1. And so at that time, they looked at the law in place and they created this continuing care agreement. And there's probably 9 different sections of that agreement. The CCA, the continuing care agreement, evolves over time. Every year I talked about the fact that we file a renewal. Things get tweaked. So the important thing is what's in your agreement applies to you because you've signed it, we've signed it. You may have come in 1995. Somebody else might have come in 2019. Well, the 2 premises for that agreement hasn't changed. Some of the little details are a little bit different. So when you're talking amongst yourself, and I've heard that happens once in a while, just know that your agreement might be a little bit different than your neighbor's. It doesn't mean that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's just the way it is. These agreements evolve over time. The big change was in 2015 when the law changed. So we had to comply with all the rule changes in the law and get that all updated. Anybody who signed an agreement before that, your agreement is still intact. We're holding us, can hold us to what's in the agreement, we'll hold you to what's in the agreement. But there are some subtle changes. I'll give you just an example of what I'm talking about. The very first residents that moved into Estates 1 and Estates 2, when they signed a continuing care agreement, they actually received a mortgage note. So they actually have a mortgage that is not subordinate to the debt holders. They actually have a first position based on the value of their refundable amount. We have, how many left? 3 people. But there's 3 people out there that actually have that agreement. And you could probably figure out who they were because they're the original people who had moved into the organization. But we don't do that anymore. And the reason for it is when they came in, we hadn't built the buildings yet. So we had to give them some security on the deposits they made. So we gave them a mortgage note. Today, we don't have to do that because what do you get? You get to occupy your unit when you come in. And so there's not a need for it. So you have a refundable amount or a non-refundable amount. That's one example. Another example is years and years ago, we didn't charge a refurbishment fee. Didn't happen. So if you've been here long enough, when you vacate your unit, your refundable amount is reduced by the amount of the refurbishment fee. Well, what we found out and why we changed it was some people keep their places immaculate. The day that they've lived there for 10 years, it didn't look like they've hardly lived there. Some people, you know, they get an Amigo or they don't see well. They end up being dirty. There's a lot of things get broke in them, and the place is really a mess. So we found out that some people we virtually have to do hardly anything. Other ones we've got to kind of do the whole thing all over. And so we felt, hey, you know what? We're just going to put a refurbishment charge in there. So it was a date and time that started. And then actually then in 2015, when the law changed, the state of Michigan said, we want everybody to be the same in the state of Michigan. So they actually put in the law that it's a minimum of 4% of your entrance fee or the actual cost of refurbishment, whatever's higher. So that's now law. We can't do anything about it. It's what's in the law. So that's a change that's happened over time. So those, so just know my point is that what's in your agreement is important for you to understand, but it might be a little bit different than your neighbor's. So why is it so important to be part of Holland Home? Well, I don't really have to sell you on that, but you can talk to your friends who aren't here and you can tell them that you listen to me and you have all of this information now you can share with them. But we believe in the highest quality possible. We're far from perfect. We'll be the first ones to tell you that. But when you compare us to everybody else, you're going to have a difficult time finding a better situation for the care and facilities that provide it. So all of our nursing homes, nursing facilities are 5-star quality facilities. Once in a while we drop down to 4 and we put immediate plans in place to get us back to a 5. We realize that every one of you is invested in entrance fee and daily amounts that you're paying us. We want to make sure that we're providing the highest level of excellence and quality as we possibly can. If you don't live in a Holland Home and you need to get into a nursing facility, you may not be able to get into ours. The choices out there sometimes aren't real good. And so I think one of the benefits that all of you saw is if I need it, I know I'm going to get in a good nursing facility. A lot of that's driven by staffing. So the middle part of this page are really staffing levels. When you look at a staffing level of for-profit nursing facilities, in nursing, their average staffing level is 2.67 hours per resident day. The very bottom of this page, when you look at our staffing pattern for assisted living, we're at 2.803. That's what's in our budget for this year. So we're staffing more in our assisted living facilities than a lot of for-profit nursing homes do in a nursing home. Way over to the right, our plan for this year is 4.185 hours per resident day. Kent County is a great county for nursing facilities, so it's a little bit higher. The average in Kent County is 3.65. But this drives a lot of the reasons why you want to be part of the Holland Home system. Another reason is if you need nursing, and I never see people lined up to get into nursing,
Oh, no.
but if you need it, 75% of our rooms are actually private rooms. You would be surprised to know that a lot of facilities still have 3- and 4-bed wards out there.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine that. It's bad enough thinking about a semi-private room. Really, since the pandemic has come across, we've converted all of our semi-privates to private rooms. We did that from an infection control perspective. I'm not sure whether we're ever going back. We're gonna take a look at that. In some cases where there may be a married couple, it makes sense maybe to have a couple semi-private rooms. But we're looking at that. So right now, 100% of our rooms are just occupied by one person in that room in nursing. All of our assisted living rooms are 100% private rooms. All of our memory care rooms are 100% private rooms. Yes?
Are you mandated by Michigan or anybody that all workers have to be vaccinated, and is that gonna affect the nursing staff?
Yeah. So the question was, are we mandated to vaccinate? At this point in time, we know it's coming, but they haven't mandated it as of yet. We hope when they do, they mandate all healthcare, because there are some employees, not a lot. We're about 70% of our employees are vaccinated, but there's 30% that are not. We think a lot of people who are not in favor of being vaccinated, if they have the opportunity to go to a place in healthcare and work unvaccinated, that they'll move because of that. So we're concerned about that, especially in today's labor market. It's a very challenging labor market. We've been fortunate that we've been able to have staffing in place. Doug Himmeline, our Vice President of Human Resources, has been doing a tremendous job on keeping our places fully staffed, but it's been a huge challenge. So we're fearful of mandating that before it's required to be mandated. We do know that there are medical exceptions. Those are very rare. They tend to deal with ones where you're allergic to it, but there's very few allergies related to the vaccine. And there are some religious exemptions, and we're hearing more and more about those that are out there. But we're encouraging all of our staff to get vaccinated. Today, just because of the high positivity rate that we have, all non-vaccinated employees are being tested twice a week. So that's not fun either. If you're unvaccinated, that's a little bit uncomfortable getting a test twice a week, and there's a cost to that and so forth. But that will be a challenge when that happens, because there's just some people who don't want to get vaccinated. So, and then on memory care, a couple other things. We were the first designated organization under Tifa Snow, who's kind of a nationally renowned person on dementia care, for her positive approach to care. So it's first in Michigan. I think we were maybe the 5th in North America to be accredited for that. And then we provide dementia journey training for all of our staff. So that's everybody from minor down to a dietary aide. When they start with Holland Home, they go through dementia journey training, which is helpful because we have a lot of residents dealing with memory care issues. And I'm a big guy, so oftentimes if I approach somebody, that can be a little bit intimidating. So I know I have to make myself a little bit smaller and don't come from the side, but come from straight on and all those sort of things. I think that's very important, but know that all of our staff have gone through that training along the way. A couple other just pieces of information that are on my mind, certainly in my new role as Chief Strategy Officer. When you look at the population today, so on this page, there's a red box around 80 plus years old. In 2020, in the United States, there were 13 million folks who are 80 plus years old. 13 million, the whole country. In 2040, that number is going to be 28 million. So it's going to grow by 113% in just a short, 20 years. 20 years sounds like a long time. Many of you probably won't be here to see that. I hope I'm around at that point in time, but the number of people who are 80 plus is going to double in the next 20 years. I've been with Holland Home 35 years. So, when you look 20 years out, this just doesn't seem like a long time to me. The number of people who are 80 plus, who is generally most of the folks we serve. Average age of somebody who moves into Holland Home is 78 years old, and generally you live with us 12 to 14 years. So guess what? That means your whole entire 80s you're living with us. And that population in the country is going to double in the next 20 years. So that's great. We're not going to have a tough time finding people to serve. But here comes the challenging part. Who's going to take care of everybody? So today, we have 6.3 people for every person over age 80 to care for you. And that's defined as somebody who's between the ages of 45 and 65. Because generally, if you're younger than 45, you're taking care of your kids and stuff. But 45 to 65, today there's 6.3 people for every person over 80. When you get to 2040, that's 3. So while the number of people out there is doubling, the number of people to help out is getting cut in half. So this will be the challenge moving forward. Yes?
What do you mean by caregiver?
What we're talking about is if you're 80 plus and you need care, so whether that's a home health aide, whether you're in an assisted living facility, whether you need a private duty aide to come in and provide services for you, whether you're in nursing, rehabbing a knee replacement, whatever those areas are that you need some sort of care and services, the number of people in the population that are there to serve you in those capacities, so whether those are nurses, doctors, nurse aides, all of those therapists, all those positions, there's going to be half as many people today compared to the population than there were in 2020.
You mean within the institution?
Within the country, in the United States,
Yeah.
yep. I'd like to say we serve 13 million people here, but it's not quite that number. So this is in the country of the United States. But that's a big challenge. And so we know today we're struggling a little bit with getting staffing, and we're in 2020, we're at 6.3. In 20 years, Adam's gonna be around probably still. He's told me he's gonna try to beat me out at 35 years, but that's gonna be a challenge moving forward. But one of the keys is if you live in a senior living community, which you've chosen to be here, we have the ability to spread our staff around. If you're living at home and you want to get care brought into your home, you're going to call a private duty agency to arrange for that staffing. When somebody shows up at your home, what's the staffing level? It's 1-to-1. And if there's only 3 people for every 1 person over 80, if a bunch of people are doing 1-to-1, you've just lowered that ratio. So the benefit we have is we're able to spread that staffing around and make it a little bit more efficient, which allows us to provide care for more people. So that's one of the strategies going forward. Well, I think I've talked enough.
Mr. Tiesenga?
Yes.
Is it going to be less employees available because of if the government mandates that everybody's got to be vaccinated when there's quite a considerable amount of people that don't trust that vaccine? And then they say, well, you're going to be fired. You're fired, which the hospitals are starting to deal with now. Is that going to also go into this difficulty finding it for aged people?
Yep, that'll just make it a little bit more challenging. I think the other thing that we have too, My kids are now old enough that they're not living at home with me anymore. But if you're Adam's age, and you've got kids at home, and your wife and yourself work, and you're talking about really having what happens if one of the kids gets sick? Well, they're not gonna go to school, and can I even get them into daycare? There's all of those challenges. And so I think what you're seeing is a lot of two-wage earner families going to one-wage earner, and one of the spouses staying home because it's very predictable. It's predictable for one of the spouses to stay home, to take care of the kids, manage them in and out of school and so forth. Well, what happened? You just took somebody out of the labor force that was productive and capable, and they're still being a great resource and watching their kids, but you lost that worker. And so I think that's a challenge as well today, especially post-pandemic. So I don't know what the next year's gonna look like. I hope as we get through this Delta variant going on, that things can get somewhat back to normal. But we were talking that way a year ago, weren't we? And so it's a challenge. It's exhausting for everybody who's in here who's got a mask on. It's exhausting for staff as they deal with that every day. So I think the mandate of the vaccine will be an issue for those who haven't been vaccinated. I also have a daughter and son-in-law who are in healthcare, and I got a post from them yesterday that they were happy to say they got the booster, and they're happy about it because they can go to work knowing they have the best protection possible. For as many people who don't want it, there's a lot of people who are saying, hey, there's reliable protection out there too. So I think more information needs to get by. We're going through this transition. Everybody's very reactive. Unfortunately, it's very political, which it doesn't need to be, but it is a challenge. It will be a challenge.
It is.
I heard an interesting article on PBS the other day. There are facilities that are offering bonuses, and I know for a period of time that was offered here also. Now, how do you equalize those bonuses or increase in salary of people coming on to those who have stayed faithful here through the whole pandemic, and how are you going to be equitable across the board?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'm not gonna try to answer it because it's really complex. But it's a challenge. Fortunately, in senior living and what we do, our turnover rate's right around 25%. That maybe sounds awful, that 1 out of every 4 people turn over in a year. But we're dealing with a lot of people in our business that number's 50, 60, 70%. So one of the best things to do is to make sure people don't leave in the first place. If you've got staff that's here, and we feel compensation is important, but we also think that if you give staff the opportunity to do good in your job every day, they want to stay here. They don't want to, nobody gets up in the morning and wants to go to work to make life miserable. They want to come and they want to feel like they're doing good. They want to feel like they're being productive people of society. And with Holland Home, you can come in, support a wonderful mission, serve many wonderful people, and that's really what we push for, and that's what we're all about. And we think that has given us a competitive advantage, but we still run into those issues where you got to be fair about that. So the good thing is we've got a great guy running our HR department who provides great intel on what's going on out there. If we're offering sign-on bonuses, it's because there's a legitimate need for that, but we're also being very respectful of those people who are working here. So good question. I'm going to turn it over to Adam for a few minutes.
Oh man, we can talk about labor and vaccine mandates for a long time.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts, but I won't share them, so that's okay. Entrance fees. So hopefully everybody is a little familiar with the entrance fee model. We obviously all paid an entrance fee, so there's 3 different plans. There's a 35, I'll use the shorthand, we call them a 35-65 or a 50-50 or a 75-25. And really each of those is referring to what percentage is refundable versus non-refundable. So every plan has two components, the non-refundable and the refundable component, but then everything varies based on which of those three plans you specifically identified. And so the higher the refundable percentage, likely the more you paid in your entrance fee, but it also means the more you will get back when you vacate your unit. So if you picked a 75-25, you will get a lower amount back as a percentage of your entrance fee, but you also had an overall lower entrance fee when you came in than somebody who would have moved into the same unit and chosen a 50-50 or a 35-65. So those three different plans really enable folks to kind of maneuver through and find what's ultimately an affordable option for them. So we'll walk through just a couple. So this slide really just outlines a little bit of the complexity here, and this goes back to Dave's original point, which is we really encourage people when they're looking at the disclosure statement and all of our various entrance fee options and living unit options, that they consult with their financial advisor, their attorney, those that they trust, to help them kind of work through what may make the most sense for them financially. So as an example here, there's the Bayberry up top at Breton Terrace. It's a 1-bedroom, 960 square feet, and you have 3 different entrance fees, and it all depends on which entrance fee plan you're choosing. So if you choose a 75-25, you paid an entrance fee of $154,000. If you chose the 50-50, it'd be $181,000. If you chose the 35-65, it'd be the highest entrance fee at $201,000. But with the 35-65, you'd get $130,000 back. So the thing to think about is really the non-refundable effectively represents your cost. The refundable piece is more or less the part that you will get back once you vacate the living unit.
Another question.
Yeah.
The refundable you get back minus.
Less two, well, it also depends, going back to Dave's point, what's in your CCA, but generally it's less 2 components, less the sales fee, which is gonna vary, again, based on how old your CCA is. It may range from 4% to 6%. I think the state law allows us to go as high as 10% or 8%? 8%. 8%. And then there's a refurbishment fee, again, assuming that that's considered in your CCA, but both of those get deducted from the refundable amount. So this slide just notes that, and it doesn't really apply here, but if you're in Bretton's North, there's an alternative plan to the 75-25. It's a 1585. We threw that one in there instead of the 75-25 just to get the math to work because it's an initial development. So here are our fee ranges. What's really interesting is when I looked at this, and I've cited this for other folks. First thing I've mentioned, some of you may have, depending on how long you've been here, but if you've moved in since kind of 2010, 2011 timeframe, you likely had to fill out an initial financial disclosure. And really the intent behind the financial disclosure is more to help us understand where you're at financially so that we can help kind of guide you into a yes position. So the objective here is always to get to yes for folks, not to use the financial disclosure to say, no, you can't move in here. It's more, okay, based on where you're at, let's get you in the best possible kind of unit to help you juggle your financial resources, make sure you can live the lifestyle you want, but also maintaining kind of that tension. So really the financial disclosure isn't intended to be this tool to say, no, you can't move in here. It's more to help guide folks along the various continuum of entrance fees that we have available to them. So what's interesting here is on the Raybrook campus, our lowest entrance fee right now is $75,000, and that's for an Estates 2 Electra. We actually have 8 of those. On the Bretton Woods campus, our lowest entrance fee is $120,000, and that's in Aspen and the Terrace, and we have 16 of those. So that's to say that if you were to look across all of our entrance fees, at least 10% of our total available or our total inventory in independent living you can get into for $125,000 or below. 1/3 of our total inventory is $175,000 or below. So we really try, and when we look at our entrance fees and model them out, we model them out against the current real estate market and try and adjust them accordingly, but the whole objective is to try and make them as affordable as possible, so that as many folks can experience kind of life here at Holland Home as possible. Couple nuances. Some of you may have this. You can add on in your CCA a garage or a carport, depending, and that's usually an addendum to your CCA, or perhaps that's a part of your original CCA. When you came in, you can also drop that. So if you get to a point where you don't want the carport or garage, you want it removed, if you paid the entrance fee for it, you can have it dropped from your CCA at that point. Breton Homes and Raybrook Homes, there might be some adjustments to the entrance fee amount based on whether the home has a porch, a finished lower level, if there's an elevator in it, a fireplace, a generator attached to it, so the entrance fee might vary just a little bit more with those homes based on what particular kind of extended finishes may be included in those units. Second person fee, I don't know, how long ago did we have the second person fee? This is a quiz.
I don't know, it's been a while.
It's been a while. So second person fee, so if you came in as a couple, you likely had to choose at the time you moved in, whether you would pay kind of a one-time fee of, at this point it's $30,000, or pay a monthly amount of $350 a month for as long as there were two people residing in the independent living unit. What this allows you to do, hopefully you had this conversation as a couple, it allows you to do two things. Look at where your resources are coming from. Are they coming more from your income or coming more from your assets? If you have more of your resources coming from your income, perhaps you are more inclined to do the $350 per month. If you had more of your financial resources coming from your assets, maybe you did the $30,000 as a one-time. The other piece here, so again, hopefully you talk that through as a couple and talk to your financial advisors as to what makes the most sense. But also, you gotta have that candid conversation, because perhaps one of you's coming in kind of more ill health than the other, and maybe you won't likely be in the independent living unit for 6, 7 years. Maybe you'll only be in that unit for 2, 3 years. Well, in that case, maybe you do just want to pick the $350 a month. But if you're both coming in very good health, both coming in at 78 or 80, and it's likely that you'll be there for quite some time, then maybe the $30,000 was the better financial option for you. The other important thing to note here, though, is that the $350 per month isn't a payment plan towards the $30,000. It's an either or. You choose it at the time you move in, and you don't get to change your pick later on based on what changes in your life. You're stuck with that. It's not one of those kind of situations. So it's an important distinction. Hopefully, sales made that clear. I think this is back to you.
All right, so the non-refundable amount, that amount is really the portion that you don't, yes, you have a question?
Wasn't that prorated? It isn't prorated anymore?
The 30,000?
The 30,000.
So the 30,000 is amortized as part of your non-refundable amount at 1.5% a month. So if something does happen to you, or the second person as part of your agreement, there is some refundability of that over the first 67 months. So that is possible. Where the $350, you pay it each month you're here. The key is if you're here longer than the 7 years, you'll end up paying more than 30,000, because 350 times 12 times 7 ends up being more than 30,000. So with the non-refundable amount, that amount is the amount that you don't get back, which means it's your cost. And we actually amortize that into our income over your life expectancy, which means that it's really a prepayment of future care, which means there could be deductibility of that in the year that you pay it as a medical expense. And so when you came in, you might not remember this, maybe you do, we gave you a letter from our auditing firm, Plant Moran, and they went through and they listed a bunch of tax regulations that were out there that kind of supported your ability to take that. So if you were able to do it, wonderful benefit for you. Some people it may not be there, but if you had put an entrance fee of $200,000 down under a 50-50 plan, you got $100,000 that's non-refundable, And generally that percentage that's deductible as a medical expense is about 50%. So you could have had a $50,000 medical deduction in the year that you came in. So nice benefit. The non-refundable, just to answer this question, we actually, that becomes non-refundable at 1.5% a month. So if something happened after 10 months, 15% of that's gone, the other 85% comes back to you at that point in time. But once you get to 67 months, it's fully used up at that point. We always give this advice to somebody who's coming in, but compare other facilities to Holland, because we actually take the non-refundable amount and multiply it times 1.5%. There are that list that I went through early in the presentation. There are some people on that list that will take the amount of your entrance fee, not the non-refundable, multiply that times 1.5%, and use that up each month until your non-refundable is used. So under a 50-50 contract with somebody else, it may take 33 months to get through that rather than 67 months. Adam and I fully understand this. This is all Greek to people when they're first moving in, so they don't even know to ask that question or even look at it. But I know our sales team, as we're talking with folks who are comparing to some other communities, we say, hey, make sure you understand how that works. But it's just a way for those communities to get that money faster. So just know that that's potentially how it works. We're taking 1.5 on the non-refundable amount. Then there's the refundable component, and that refundable amount is due back to you after you've vacated the apartment. So as long as you're still occupying your independent living unit, that money is kind of stale money to you. You can't do anything with it. It's not available for anything. Once you vacate it, then we have either 180 days or 275 days or 550 days, depending on what it says in your contract, to pay that back to you, or at the time we resell the unit. So if we resell the unit, generally within 30 days, the refund goes back to you. But that's when it becomes refundable. So the resident has moved into another level of care, they've terminated the agreement by moving out of Holland or they've passed away. Once those things happen, then that clock starts ticking for the 180 days, the 275 days, or the 550. The 550 days only applies to Brent Homes North. 275 went in place in 2015. If your contract is prior to 2015, then you're at 180 days. That refundable amount we talked about is reduced by a sales charge of 6%. That's the current charge today. We can charge up to 8%, but we're choosing 6%. And the greater of refurbishment costs, or 4%, whichever is higher. And that comes right out of the state law. It's interesting, when the law got updated back in 2014-15, they allowed you to pick whatever date you wanted to pick the refundable back. And so there are some facilities that will say, we're only gonna do it when your unit's resold. So that could be 10 years. We generally don't have a unit that's available for 10 years, but we've had some that have been 2 or 3 years that happen. So we're limiting to 275 or 180 days in most of our situations. So this is just a slide. It's actually more helpful for Adam and I, that compares the contracts under the old law and the new law. So the new law went into effect July 1, 2015. We used to charge 4% of the entrance fee as a sales fee. So if your contract is before July 1 of 2015, your sales fee was 4%. Anybody after that, 6%. Refurbishment cost under the old law, it was the actual. Now the new law says it's the actual or 4%, whichever is higher. The non-refundable, that hasn't changed. It's 1.5% amortization. Under the old law, the non-refundable, if you passed away, the amortization got accelerated to 5%, and that got eliminated under the new law. So the old contracts, that's true, but it doesn't really matter anymore because anybody who is under an old contract's already been here longer than 67 months. So it's kind of a moot point, but that was a big change. So we had, not a lot, but we would have situations where folks would move in, and within a year and a half, 20 months, they'd pass away, and 100% of that non-refundable amount would not go back. And that was one of the reasons why we raised the sales fee from 4 to 6%, because we gave up a significant amount of revenue there. Estates 1 and 2, for those who have been here a while, we have this annual reconciliation process we go through. Well, we don't have that anymore. So some people are here, we have to go through that reconciliation and do that every April. So our rates go up every April, and if you have a reconciliation, then there's usually additional charge for how we reconcile those costs. We don't do that anymore. Uh-oh, my battery's running low. I don't know if that's for the laptop or myself, but the battery's going a little bit low. Number of contracts we have are 2 now, and there's a little different font that's going on, no problem. So other elements of the continued care agreement, I'll go through those real briefly here. Occupancy, so occupancy to the unit that you signed up is only available to the persons whose name is on the continuing care agreement. So that doesn't mean that the kids can't come for a weekend or that sort of thing, but you can't have a bunch of people make their residence within your unit and expect them to live there. We don't have any problem with those short-term stays, but occupancy is pretty much limited to those who have their name on the agreement. Marriage, person who's single and they marry somebody who's 55 or older, you can add that spouse to your agreement. You don't have to add them to the agreement, but if something happened to you and you passed away or leave, then they've got to leave too. So we always recommend that if you are single and you get married, that you add that person to the agreement. It's the most effective way to be able to handle that. And you can only do that once. And you get chuckles, but there's been some occasions where there's been more than one marriage that's happened, and we've had to work through that. But there can be a strategy to perpetuate the value of the life care agreement by keep marrying people in and out. And I'm not sure nobody would figure that out, but we've got some pretty smart Dutchmen around. So this is an important piece here, and I want to have the discussion now because it may impact you in the room, may impact somebody that you're talking to. But when you add a spouse to an agreement, and especially if it's a second, third marriage, a lot of times you've got an agreement in place at that point in time because spouse may have had assets under a previous marriage, you had assets over a previous marriage, so you do a prenuptial agreement, so just everybody understands how this is all going to work. Our agreements are not party to prenuptial agreements. So when a couple signs a continuing care agreement, we don't really care if it's the first marriage or the 10th marriage. You're both signing to the agreement, you're both agreeing to cover the expenses of both people for as long as you're here. A lot of times that means that one spouse may have more resources than the other in a second marriage. You're committing to make sure you take care of that. We also have this come up a lot of times where there may be siblings. We've had a mother and daughter that have moved in at Breton one time under a continuing care agreement. So we want to make sure that they understand when they're signing that agreement, you're on the hook, the couple, for the couple's expenses for as long as you're both here, no matter what your prenup agreement says. So that's just important to realize that. I'd rather have that discussion now than dealing with family members who are all upset later down the road. Holland Home always retains ownership to the unit, so when you sign a continuing care agreement, you don't own your apartment. you have right of occupancy to that apartment, but Holland Home owns the apartment. So we're not changing title over to you, we still retain title to the apartment or home. Yes?
Can you explain why then I have to pay property taxes on my unit?
Yeah, very good question. The question is then why do I have to pay property taxes? Well, you have to pay property taxes because we get assessed taxes. And we put in a disclosure statement long before you moved in that how we're gonna handle those property taxes. We're going to assess them to you based on the value of the 50-50 agreement for your apartment to the value of all the 50-50 agreements. And that pro rata share is gonna be applied toward the tax bill, and that's what you're gonna pay. So we could, there's a lot of different ways we could have tackled property taxes. One of them could have been, instead of having a $725 monthly fee, we could have charged everybody $2,000 a month and just said your property taxes are taken care of. We didn't choose that way back when. I wasn't here when they chose the method of doing it. And so what we said was we're gonna take the assessment on the property that you're in. And on this campus, Estates 1 has a separate assessment to itself. Estates 2 and homes are part of one assessment, and Estates 3 are part of one assessment. So what we do is we simply take each apartment that we have, we line up the 50-50 entrance fee that's current, so everybody's measured the same way, and we take the proration of the amount for your apartment to the total, and whatever that pro rata amount is, we multiply times the tax bill, and that's the amount that you pay. It's probably not the most perfect way to do it, but it's the way we've been doing it since 1987. We've never changed how we've handled it, and we think it's a fair way to allocate the taxes. What we've done is because we're registered as a life care community in the state of Michigan, under the school tax code, we've applied for the principal residency exemption. So in that tax amount, in the millage amount, there is no school tax. So that's a huge benefit because it'd be 18 more mills that you'd have in your tax. And most commercial entities have to pay that. So on any vacant property that Holland Home has, we end up paying that higher millage rate on that vacant property. Once you get into licensed facilities at Holland Home, so in Raybrook Manor or the nursing center, they're exempt from property taxes, so there are no taxes in there. City of Kentwood, for the assisted living facilities, they tax those. So that's about $2 a day in their room rate that they pay property taxes in assisted living in Kentwood. Yep. And that's just the way the law works. We were predated before the law changed here. So that's how we do that. It's a cost that we bear, and we don't have a money tree somewhere, and so you guys are the ones who pay for everything that happens here, so that's how we pass on that cost. But that's a great question. Question came up yesterday as well. When you move into the licensed care facilities, we have a tool called the Resident Care Assessment Tool. It's an objective tool. So when you move into DeVos unit, we have potentially 5 service levels you're at. And it's like, they range, from a lower amount to a much more expensive amount. And how do you determine which level I'm at? Well, we have a very sophisticated tool that we go through that measures cognitive ability, your need for support under activities of daily living, medication administration you have, that you need, a bunch of different factors. And through those factors, it converts into a score, and depending on where that score ends up, puts you into a service level. So you can't sweet talk to nurse to say, I'm not really a level 3, I'm a level 2 because it's gonna be lower money. The nurse fills out the form, comes out to this level, and that's what generates what service level you're at. So it's a very objective way for us to determine how much you should be paying, and it's important for us to understand that because at those higher service levels, you need more care. Well, how do you get more care? You gotta have the staff. Well, where does staff come from? Well, we gotta pay them. So that's kind of how it works. Years and years and years ago, we were challenged by the subjectivity of how that got worked. And so nobody wanted to charge more, but they're the first ones to complain, I don't have enough resources to provide the staffing. So we came up with this nice way to use this tool so we have the resources to put the staffing in place. If you're living in independent living and you move into the manor, there's no additional entrance fee. So your entrance fee bought you that priority access. So if you're gonna move at some point into DeVos or one of the memory care units, there is no additional entrance fee. You've already got access to that for that. If you're moving in between independent living units, you move into a smaller unit, now you wanna get a bigger unit, then there's a change that we have to work through, but when you move into licensed areas, no additional entrance fee. Where does the refundable amount go after you vacate? We talked about the timing of that, but basically, there's two options. The refund, if you've passed away, either goes to your estate or it goes to your trust. Those are the only two options. The only way it can go to a trust is if you tell us you have a trust, and then we'll put we have an assignment form that we can have you sign. Why would you have a trust? Well, it's easier. Sometimes it avoids all the issues with probate court. Probate's not a bad thing. Sometimes probate is less expensive than getting a trust set up. But there's other benefits of having a trust because you can name executors and allow you to process your estate that way. But those are the two options. So if you have a trust, if you've gone through the process of having that set up for you, make sure that we have that assignment form for you. You can contact our offices and we can check to make sure that we've got it in file. We've got a real quick way that we can check that. If you don't have a trust, there's nothing wrong with it. Just know that if you pass away, the refund for your refundable amount will actually be made out to the estate of the resident. We can't send it to your kids. We can't send it to some favorite charity of yours. Those are the only two options that we have. Financial assistance. So we talked about, what are the two reasons, what are the two benefits of the continuing care agreement? One is access, the second one is if I run out of money, I'm not gonna get kicked out of here. Well, if you have a problem paying your fees, we have a process for helping you work through that situation. So we expect everybody to pay as long as they're able to, and when they can't, you gotta let us know. So when you let us know, we actually have a person that reports to Adam. Her name's Stephanie Holtz. What's her official title?
Financial liaison.
Financial liaison.
Okay.
So what she can do is she can help you walk through those situations. She's very good at it. She knows access to public support as well as access to our benevolent program. Everybody's situation's a little bit different, but we're here to help you when it gets to that particular situation. And what we do is we have you fill out a financial disclosure. We get an understanding of where your particular situation is at that point in time. And if we determine that, yep, you've got a problem paying your bills, we'll help you figure out what amount you can pay based on your current situation. And most of our charity care happens in nursing and assisted living, but it can happen in independent living. We have, many of you may have had a spouse that lived in nursing care, assisted living for a while. It's kind of expensive. You can kind of go through a lot of resources in that situation. Maybe it's strapped you a little bit living in independent living. So we've helped people in assisted living too. Again, there's a couple of people in the finance office that know who those folks are. I don't even know. I know where to look, but there's only a couple people in the organization that knows where that is. No other staff member knows that's working on the floors anywhere. So we keep that confidential. And there's not a special place you go to get that kind of care. You're in the same places that you get care today. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. talked about this, that you have to fill out a financial disclosure form. I think this piece is also important to realize. Today, there's a lot of very smart elder law attorneys out there who can help people say, oh, I can help you so you don't have to pay any money to a nursing home. You don't want to pay any money to a nursing home. And I don't understand that logic in the first place. We pay for things all that we need for our whole life. But somehow when it comes to the last thing you need, quality nursing home care, you don't want to pay those people. Well, it's in our situations, if you divest money, give it away, with the expectation of getting charity care, and that amount is more than $5,000 a year, then we'll have a discussion about whether we can help you or not. And part of this is many of you are exceptionally good supporters of our Charity Care Resident Assistance Fund, and we have to make sure that when we go to our constituency and ask for that support, that you know that those that we're helping aren't off protecting the majority of their assets from being spent down. And so if divestment is proven, then we necessarily don't help folks in that situation. And those are challenging discussions to have. The unfortunate part is I've had to have those discussions with families in the past. They're not fun discussions to have. I understand where they're at, you know. Nobody wants to spend the kind of dollars it takes to have to spend on nursing and assisted living care. It's expensive. But on the other hand, it costs a lot of money to provide that quality care, and we want you to pay as long as you can. If you run out of money, we're here to help you. If you give it away expecting it, then we end up having a conversation about about whether we can help you out at that time.
Well, yeah.
Okay, and then the last couple slides, I'm not going to go through in great detail on, but it's kind of where our current rates are. So you can look at those. We pass out rate sheets every April, so you can kind of see those. It's helpful. Adam and I did this presentation for prospective residents and financial planners earlier in the year, so that's why that date is there. But that kind of concludes our presentation. We'll just kind of open it up for maybe about 10 minutes worth of questions here, and then we'll call it a day. One back here.
I heard that at Bretton there's quite a few empty apartments.
Here.
You'll repeat it?
I'll repeat it.
And so like even here, like let's just say there are a lot of empty apartments and people go to other places. Would our monthly fees go up to cover the cost of the facilities that aren't covered by the empty apartments?
Yeah, so the question was at reference that there's a lot of empty apartments at Bretton. We've had a few here too, but do vacant apartments impact the cost for residents? We try not to charge that to folks. And right now, of all of the independent living units, what was the report? 58, was that the number? We have 58 empty apartments right now. Most of those are at Bretton. You know, there's probably 45 at Bretton, maybe 13 here. So there's more there. Some of it driven at Bretton was they opened up a new assisted living facility in July. There were many people waiting to get in there. So 15 of those apartments were just folks moving in. And you can't move people in them until they've vacated. So we kind of knew that was coming. So every year when we go through the budgeting process, we have to budget what we think is a valid occupancy number that we're gonna have. And right now, our independent living is around 90% occupied throughout all of Holland Home. Historically, it's been about 94% occupancy. We're much higher than most places in the first place. But whatever that is, whatever goes into our plan for the next year based on where we are, does have an impact on where revenue is, but it also drives staffing levels. It also drives a lot of the expense side of things too. So that does go into the bearing of it. Just to give you an idea, a vacant apartment for a year is about $11,000 on average. That's what the cost is to have it vacant. So we don't want that. And over the years, we have times, it was actually worse 2009, 10, 11. We got as high as about 85 empty apartments at that point in time. So we have strategies to kind of deal with that, and it takes time. We're not gonna turn around in 3-4 months. But I think a year from now, we're gonna be in a much better place than we are, and we'll get that all kind of built into our plans. But good question.
Do you accept long-term care funds, just for nursing or also for assisted living?
So the question is, do we accept long-term care funds? Absolutely. We don't care where the money comes to pay us. And many of you have long-term care. I think the key is typically a long-term care policy is a policy between you and the long-term care insurance company. So the payment often goes to you, and then you take it and use it to pay for long-term care. But we have staff, there's a lot of times medical forms that have to be filled out to get the long-term care policies, because they want verification that you need assistance on 2 of your 6 ADLs and all that sort of stuff. We have folks that can kind of help out with that. But if you've got long-term care insurance, wonderful. We love it when you have that. That's been good planning on your part. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we're happy you're here, and we'll stick around for a couple minutes if you happen to have a question that pertains just to you. But we got you out of here well before the 4 hours. You can enjoy the outdoors a bit more. But thank you for allowing us to serve you each and every day. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Very good.
Now, I live in Holmes.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I enjoyed the presentation.
Good.
You know, it's tough, there's a whole bunch of I live in Holmes.
Yeah.
And,